There are moments in life when everything around you is moving, voices rising and falling, plates clattering, people laughing, but someone, somewhere, is drowning in complete silence. Not the kind you can hear, but the kind that screams louder than any noise. And on this particular morning, in a crowded small-town diner where everyone knew everyone's business, one man heard that silence clearly. He wasn't looking for trouble. He wasn't even supposed to be there. But when a man who has spent 40 years learning to read danger like a second language sees something wrong, he doesn't just walk away. What happened next would rip through that town like a storm nobody saw coming, forcing people to face a truth they'd been hiding from for far too long. The guy sitting in the corner booth didn't stand out. Not even a little. Gray hair, probably mid-60s, wearing an ordinary jacket, nothing flashy, nothing that would make you look twice. He ordered his coffee black, didn't ask for the menu, and kept to himself. To everyone passing by, he was just another quiet stranger, maybe retired, maybe passing through. But underneath that calm, unremarkable surface was someone who'd commanded missions in places most people couldn't find on a map, who'd made decisions that saved lives and took them, who carried the weight of brothers lost in wars that would never be declassified. His name was Jonathan Halley, and he'd been a rear admiral in the Navy SEALs before he hung it all up. He came to this town for one reason: to disappear into the quiet he'd been chasing for years. But sometimes, the things you're running from have a way of finding you anyway. Her name was Emily. Early 20s, maybe younger, with tired eyes that seemed like they were always apologizing for something. She moved through the diner like she was trying not to be noticed, refilling coffee cups and clearing plates with a kind of mechanical precision. Most people barely looked at her, just another waitress doing her job. But Jonathan noticed something else. When she reached across his table to top off his mug, her sleeve pulled back just enough to reveal it a bruise, dark and deep, the kind that doesn't come from bumping into a counter. And then there was another one, faint but unmistakable, near her collarbone. The shape told the whole story. Fingers. Someone had grabbed her. Hard. Jonathan didn't react. Didn't say anything. Didn't stare. He'd learned a long time ago that reacting too soon can make things worse. So, he watched it. He noticed how she flinched when someone across the room raised their voice, even though they were just joking around. He saw how her shoulders tensed, how her smile never quite reached her eyes, how she moved like someone who'd been trained to stay small and out of the way. This wasn't new for her. This was survival. He'd seen injuries like that before, but not on battlefields. During humanitarian missions overseas, hostage recoveries, interventions that never made the news, he'd seen what violence looked like when it hid behind closed doors. And right here, in a place where people knew each other's names and shared recipes and gossip, that same violence was happening, and everyone was pretending not to see it. When Emily came back with his check, Jonathan decided to test the waters. "Long shift?" he asked, keeping his voice casual, non-threatening. She nodded quickly. "Always is," she said, her voice steady in that rehearsed kind of way. As she turned to leave, her sleeve slipped again, hoosed slightly. She adjusted it immediately, like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Jonathan put cash on the table, way more than the bill. "Keep the change," he said. She hesitated, looking uncomfortable. "Sir, that's too much." He looked at her directly but gently. "Consider it respect." The word landed differently than he expected. She froze for just a second, like she hadn't heard that word in a very long time. "Thank you," she whispered, still not meeting his eyes. And then she walked away. But in that brief moment before she did, Jonathan saw something he recognized: fear. Not of him, of someone else. That someone was sitting at the counter, loud and taking up space like he owned the place. His name was Travis Cole. And he was exactly the kind of guy everyone in town knew but nobody crossed. Broad-shouldered, mechanic's jacket, always ready with a joke or a complaint. People laughed at his stories, even when they weren't funny, because that's what you did with guys like Travis. And everyone knew Emily lived with him. Everyone also knew she had bruises, but somehow, nobody ever put those two facts together. Or maybe they did, and just chose not to say anything. Jonathan watched as Emily approached Travis's table. Watched her body language shift entirely. Shoulders tight, eyes down, hands balled into fists at her sides. Travis grabbed her wrist when she reached for his plate, not gently. "Move faster," he snapped. The diner went quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Then the noise came rushing back, like nothing had happened. People looked away. Conversations resumed. Life went on, except for one man who'd seen enough. Jonathan stood up, not dramatically. Just stood, and he said, calm as anything, "Let go of her." The entire diner froze. Travis turned around, sizing him up with a look that was half amused, half annoyed. "Mind your business, old-timer." Jonathan didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. "It became my business when you crossed a line." Travis scoffed. "You got no idea who I am." Jonathan met his eyes with the kind of stare that didn't blink, didn't waver. The kind of stare that had once made enemy commanders reconsider their choices. "I don't need to." Something in that look made Travis release Emily's wrist, slowly, like he wasn't quite sure what had just happened. Emily backed away, shaking. Jonathan sat back down, and just like that, the moment passed, but something had shifted. For Jonathan, this wasn't just a bad day at a diner anymore. This was a mission. That night, instead of heading back to his motel, Jonathan sat in his truck across the street from Emily's apartment building. No binoculars, no weapon in sight. Huspatiens, the same kind of patience that had once kept him motionless in hostile territory for 14 hours straight. Around 9:47 p.m., Travis's truck pulled up. Emily came out to meet him, and Jonathan watched her entire posture change. She looked smaller, scared. They argued, voices low at first. Then Travis shoved her, not hard enough to knock her down, but hard enough to make his point. Jonathan's hand went to the door handle, then stopped. Not yet. SEALs don't act on emotion. They act on certainty. But watching that scene brought back memories he'd tried to bury. Years ago, during a classified extraction overseas, his team had rescued a woman from a warlord who'd been holding her captive. She had bruises just like Emily's. The whole village knew what was happening, but nobody said a word. Weeks after Jonathan's team left, she was killed. The silence had returned, and so had the violence. That failure haunted him. More than any combat operation ever had. He wasn't going to let it happen again. The next morning, Jonathan went back to the diner. Same booth, same coffee. Emily looked worse, split lip, slight limp. He didn't ask if she was okay. Instead, he said quietly, "You don't deserve what's happening to you." She froze. Her eyes filled with something that wasn't quite tears, it was panic. "I don't know what you're talking about," she whispered. Jonathan leaned back, giving her space. "I won't force you to speak, but if you ever decide to, I'll listen." She shook her head quickly. "You shouldn't get involved." He nodded. That's what they always say for the first time. She really looked at him, really saw him. "What if he finds out?" Jonathan's answer was immediate and unflinching. Then he made a mistake. Over the next few days, Jonathan quietly started asking questions, not obvious ones. Just small, careful inquiries. He talked to neighbors, he observed. One deputy sheriff, off the record, finally admitted what everyone already knew. "She's not the first," he said. Jonathan thanked him and walked away. Jaw tight. This wasn't just about one woman and one abuser. This was a pattern, a system, protected by silence and fear. And Jonathan Halle had spent his entire career dismantling systems that protected the wrong people. That evening, he found a note taped to his motel door. Simple, direct. Mind your own business. No signature, no need for one. Travis wanted him scared. Instead, Jonathan smiled. That note was proof. He folded it carefully and put it in his pocket. Evidence. The breaking point came 2 nights later. Jonathan woke to the sound of screaming. He was already moving before his brain fully caught up. Across the street, Emily's apartment door flew open and she stumbled out, crying. Travis followed, and this time, he hit her. Right there. Out in the open. Curtains twitched, phones came out, but nobody called the police. Nobody except Jonathan. He crossed the street and stepped between them. "You touch her again," he said, voice calm and cold, "and this ends very badly for you." Travis laughed. "You think you scare me?" Jonathan looked him dead in the eye. "I've ended men who thought they were worse than you." The laughter stopped. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Travis backed away, swearing under his breath. Emily collapsed, and Jonathan caught her before she hit the ground. Later, in the fluorescent glow of a hospital waiting room, Emily finally told him everything. The threats, the isolation, the nights she spent locked in fear, wondering if this would be the night things went too far. Travis had taken her phone, controlled her money, followed her to work. "He said no one would believe me," she whispered, and he was right. Jonathan listened, not as a soldier, but as someone who'd seen this exact scenario play out too many times before. "This ends now," he said. Emily looked at him, exhausted and afraid. "How?" Jonathan answered carefully. "Legally. Completely. Permanently." He didn't rush. SEALs never do. Within 48 hours, he'd contacted people he hadn't spoken to in years. Retired JAG officer, a former NCIS investigator, an advocate who owed him a favor. A plan came together. Not through force, through evidence. Emily agreed to help, on her own terms. She went back home, but this time with police awareness and a hidden recorder. That night, Travis took the bait. "You think that old man can protect you?" Sneered. Emily stayed silent. Travis kept talking, bragging about the hits, about scaring witnesses, about knowing which cops wouldn't do anything. Every word was recorded. The next morning, Jonathan walked into the sheriff's office and placed his military ID on the desk. The room changed instantly. "I'm filing a formal federal complaint," A sighed calmly, "and I expect full cooperation." The sheriff swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." Travis was arrested. He resisted, threatened, even left until the recordings were played, until witnesses started stepping forward, emboldened by someone finally taking action. Emily testified. Others did too, former victims, neighbors, even officers who admitted they'd failed before. Travis's confidence shattered piece by piece. But men like him don't go quietly. He made bail that same night, and Jonathan's motel window exploded inward with a rock and a message. Jonathan didn't flinch. He just packed his bag. This wasn't over yet. The final confrontation happened back at the diner. Travis showed up in broad daylight, surrounded by people. He wanted to make a scene. "You ruined my life," he snarled. Jonathan stood slowly. "You did that yourself." Travis raised his fist. Before it could land, deputies moved in. This time, they didn't hesitate. Handcuffs clicked. The town watched, and this time nobody looked away. The trial was packed. Emily testified, steady and strong. Others followed. The courtroom heard everything. Travis was convicted. No deals. No silence. Justice, finally spoken out loud. Weeks later, Jonathan returned to Miller's diner one last time. Emily was still working there, but she looked different. She smiled, stood taller. She told him she was leaving town, starting fresh somewhere new. "Thank you," she said. Jonathan shook his head. "You did the hardest part." Then he drove away at dawn, leaving behind a town that had finally learned what happens when one person refuses to look away. Because courage isn't just found on battlefields. Sometimes it's found in a diner booth and a quiet voice that says, "This has to stop." And sometimes that's enough to change everything.